Good evening, or not evening, oh my goodness.
Well, it's dark
Good
out.
morning. It does look dark in here. Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started with today's Committee of the Whole. So Commissioners, just a couple we don't have executive session today, no? But we do have Economic Development Project Team at 12:30. So those of you who serve on that, that's going to be in room 601. So to start us off today, I am actually going to turn to our City Attorney who has someone to introduce who is new to the city.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge and introduce our new Deputy City Attorney, and that would be Philip Strom. And Philip joins us from Escanaba, and he brings with him experience as a CFO, experience as a county administrator and prosecutor. He's done some great programs there that we're hoping that we can do some great programs together here as well. So meet Philip, and Philip meet the City Commission and the Mayor and Manager.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So welcome, Philip. I know I had a chance to meet you briefly. We're delighted to have you in Grand Rapids, and welcome. And I'm sure my colleagues around this table are looking forward to getting to know you as well. So reach out to them, and hopefully you can find a time to connect. So you're welcome. All right, that will move us to our agenda. The first item before us is a resolution approving a request for our colleague Commissioner Lanier to attend the MML convention, and this is this month, at the end of the month in Detroit. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All right, and just commissioners, to let you know, at a prior meeting, we had approved Commissioner Jones to attend. He has since determined that he is unable to attend. So Commissioner Lanier will be our voice and represent Grand Rapids in Detroit. I know there's a number of really important meetings there, and so I'll make sure that I send you along some invitations where you can stand in for me as well if you're able to. So thank you for doing that, and I believe that we do have some city staff attending as well. Oh, great. All right. I asked the full question. I called the question, right? All in favor?
No.
Okay, so all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving the request from Winn and Shun for a Class C development liquor license at 1003 Michigan Street Northeast, Suite B. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right.
Good morning.
Hello.
Winn and Shun LLC submitted their application for a new Class C Development District liquor license, which will be located at 1003 Michigan Avenue Northeast. The Michigan Street Corridor Improvement District did review and approve their application at their meeting on December 12th in 2018, and the application has finalized the review process and is being recommended for approval.
All right, commissioners, any questions about this? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution designating South Division and Granville Corridor Improvement Authority as a redevelopment project area. Can I get a motion?
Moved. Support.
All right, hello, welcome.
Good morning. So the resolution before you would allow businesses in the South Division, Granville, CIA development area to qualify for the approval of a liquor license by the Liquor Control Commission if they meet all of their qualification criteria. So the South Division, Granville, CIA reviewed the policy and considered this and recommended for the approval at their meeting on August 20th.
Great, thank you. And colleagues, this would be similar to other development authorities for development liquor license, which is different than your general liquor license. So, all right, any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next is a resolution designating polling locations and fixing compensation for election inspectors for the for the November 5th municipal general election. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right. And I'll turn it to our city clerk to tell us about this.
The charter says fixing. It says the commission shall fix the rates, so
All right. Well, we are fixing.
we are not fixing elections, we're just fixing the rates.
It is an odd word to use, but thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, okay, so Section 8 of the charter under elections talks about that the commission sets polling locations, even though state law says it's by the election commission. So, but anyway, that's what we follow. But the other part of it says fixing election inspector pay. And City Manager Washington, in his travels around the city, talking to some of the election inspectors out there, and I've talked to inspectors too, and we haven't increased the pay since 2014. So looking at moving the chair pay up from 175 to 200. And then for those people who work the e-poll books, so there's a little bit more technical to that than someone who's handing out applications or tearing off stubs. So we're moving them up we're separating them up from regular election inspectors. And then election inspectors will be moving up in pay as well. So
Great.
that's my recommendation.
All right, well deserved. Any other questions or comments?
I just have a question about the consolidation of precincts.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about?
Oh, sorry, yes, and also, being it's a non-federal or state election, we can consolidate precincts like we have done in the past. So there's two most of the consolidations are precincts that are in their own building. There's two that we're consolidating that are not in the same building. So in the second ward, precincts 35 and 41 are consolidated together. That's for Harrison Park's, North Park School.
Okay.
Where they had remediation of asbestos
Yes.
this summer, and I'm glad because they were supposed to be done just before the August election, but I got a little nervous, and then they had a whole issue with carpet and other things. And so I don't know if they're completely done there, but anyway, just not to confuse voters, we're leaving those consolidated for this election as well. So all the voters have received a postcard, and we'll put notices at the school of where they need to go. And then on the, in the first ward, precincts 7 and 11 are being consolidated together because KEC Oakley is no longer run by Grand Rapids Public Schools. The ISD is running all those KEC programs for Grand Rapids Public Schools, so that building is not closed now. And so we are consolidating with that, and then I'm gonna be going to Election Commission to permanently consolidate those two precincts together. They're very low number. They're like 800 and 900 voters in each precinct, and they're next to each other. So I'm gonna permanently ask the Election Commission to permanently consolidate those together to make it one precinct, 7 and 11 to become one precinct. And then I'm moving some locations around so I can get precinct 8 out of Stocking School and back up the hill. And Covenant Village is gonna become a precinct now. So that precinct where they vote right now, in 2020, those that vote at Shawmut Hills are gonna vote at Covenant Village, and precinct 8, which was at Wallen Congregational, is gonna go to Shawmut Hills.
Okay.
So there's gonna be a little bit of movements around, but we'll do plenty of updates so everybody knows where we're at.
Okay, and Commissioner, Covenant, you think that's a good location?
I do.
I think half the voters in that precinct live.
Yeah, they live, right.
Yeah.
It's a walk downstairs.
It's a great room for us.
Far better than Stocking School.
Yeah.
But,
They have parking too.
yeah, Wallen Congregational was nice, but I think that it's a good solution.
Okay. And then with the continued increase in absentee votes?
Yes.
Do you anticipate additional precinct consolidation down the road?
Yeah, when we get to 2022, after the census and all the redistricting gets done, and we'll have to take a deep dive into that. But at the same time is, yes, in the state's I'm in some task forces where we're looking at that, and we can increase the amount of people or voters per precinct, but we want to make sure that at the same time that we are not having people drive or take long bus rides in precincts. So we need to be very cognizant on sometimes small precincts are okay because based on the community that they're in.
Yeah.
So we'll be very cognizant of that because we could probably go down to, if we were gonna make them equal, we could go probably down to 50 precincts, but that's not equitable. So I just want to so we will keep track of how we do that and have a lot of community engagement as we get after the census and start moving into what those are.
Okay, thank you. Good to know. Commissioners, any other questions?
That's good, thanks.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next is a resolution approving the commemorative designation of Michigan Street from Monroe Avenue to College Avenue as Medical Mile. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, Mr. McCall, you want to tell us about this?
Sure. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Yeah, a petition was received from the key investors up on the Hill, being Michigan State University, Venanno Institute, Spectrum Health, and Grand Valley State University. A public hearing was held last week. No objections to the request were received. It's also been circulated to city departments, and also no objections were received there. There is a report from our office included in the packet. This request does satisfy the 4 conditions in the commission policy, and so yeah, we would recommend that this be approved.
Great. And the primary benefit of this from the early conversations would be that, one, they could add some commemorative signage recognizing that section as medical mile, which many people refer to it as, and then also if they wanted to use that as an address, the post office would recognize it. Commissioners, we did hear from some folks further up Michigan Street who are interested in potentially expanding it beyond College. Our feedback has been that request would go through the same process that this one did, that there is a possibility to expand it down the road, but there would need to be some additional processes before we move forward with that. And then if that's the decision, then it would come back before us for a similar process. So, any questions or comments?
I just think this is something we're already used to saying, that this is a medical mile. So between College and Monroe, it's just more official.
Yeah. All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, next is a resolution establishing fee items and rates authorized by the Crime Prevention through Environmental Design Ordinance that we recently passed. Can I get a motion?
Support?
All right, and our acting planning director, Ms. Turkelson's here. Welcome in your new capacity.
What a week to begin. So these next 2 items are actually follow-up to the Subhead ordinance that was passed by the commission 2 weeks ago. And so they would implement the ordinance as it's written, establishing fees and fines associated with that ordinance. We don't have a lot to go off of, as you may recall that we are kind of leading new territory here, so we don't have a lot of other communities to look to. So we felt like it was most applicable to utilize existing fines and fee structures that we have in the city specific to zoning enforcement and code compliance. So if there's any questions.
All right, commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Kelly?
Yes, I want to have a sense of process for this because we don't want surprises out in the community. So I don't know how we can, or have we tried to notify people about this? Not everybody's watching these or reading the newspaper about it. I think it's a great ordinance, makes sense, including how you are looking at the fees, but notice and how, any sense of how people are going to react, businesses are going to react.
Yeah, so we are currently working on a work plan for the Subhead officer, and a large part of that is some community engagement right out from the start. And so he will be working with neighborhood associations, business associations, to make sure that we're communicating what is this new program and how will it work. We've promised to you and to the community that we will lead with education. We will not lead with enforcement. Right. And so that is the initial starting point that we will have. What you can't see in the ordinance, but is very typical, is we do have courtesy notices, or I think it's correction notice. That is simply a notice without a fine associated with it or a fee associated with it. And we always send those out first about, hey, did you know that you're in violation? And we work to correct that violation before we initiate any fine process.
Excellent.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, next, you can stay up if you want. I have you down for the next 2. So next is a resolution providing for the publication of a proposed ordinance to amend Chapter 170 Municipal Civil Infractions, and that is to establish the fines for the violations related to the Subhead ordinance. Can I get a motion?
So move. Support?
All right, any additional questions or comments about that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, Commissioners, we have 2 final items before us. The first one is a marijuana update, and then we'll have a discussion on the process and timeline for filling the comptroller vacancy. So we'll start with Ms. Turkelson again to provide us with the marijuana update and next steps and what we can expect over the next couple months.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
So we thank you for this opportunity to allow us to come and provide you with an update. So really the purpose of today is to accomplish three things. We want to give you a status report on where we are at with relative to our medical marijuana applications that we accepted in the spring. We would like to provide you with an, oh, you're right, I'm missing my PowerPoint, Asante, thank you.
I got it.
Oh, thank you, Joel.
Got it.
We want to provide you with an overview of the state's legislative changes relative to recreational marijuana. Thank you very much. And we also want to initiate the discussion on what are our next steps locally relative to the state's changes for recreational marijuana. So on November 1st, the state of Michigan will begin accepting recreational marijuana licenses. So prior to that date, the city needs to have a regulatory framework in place. So therefore, on September 24th, we will be asking you to introduce a licensing ordinance for recreational marijuana or for marijuana facilities. This will effectively opt the city in to allowing recreational marijuana facilities. That said, the licensing ordinance would be structured so that we would not begin to accept applications for 6 months. In that time, the planning department will work with the commission and the planning commission to develop a zoning ordinance amendment that would be specific or speak to and regulate recreational marijuana uses. In addition, that 6 months will allow the clerk's office time to prepare to begin accepting marijuana license applications. So why a licensing ordinance? This will provide us, as I stated, a regulatory framework before that November 1st deadline. It'll provide us with an effective enforcement tool for the MyVita and other pertinent city codes. It also allows us to advance the city's sustainability and accessibility goals, which don't typically coincide with land use regulations. And so I would like to turn over this part of the presentation for the specifics to Landon Bartley, who's a senior planner with the planning department and is serving as our subject matter expert. Thank you.
Thanks. So as far as medical marijuana, I just wanted to quickly update the commission on where we have been so far. We, as you know, had a window to accept marijuana applications, an initial window in which time we received 89 applications. And we accepted 80 of those into a draw that happened on April 26th. That draw was intended to help set the order of consideration by the Planning Commission. After that initial application window, we received 13 more applications, so the longest queue we had was 93 applications, and the Planning Commission began reviewing those in May. The Commission has approved 11 applications, denied 2, and one of those, denied 3. One of those is under appeal right now and is going to be appealed to Board of Zoning Appeals on September 19th. Because of the way the ordinance is structured, applications can knock out other applications nearby because of separation distances. So we've had 28 applications get buffered out by another application that's been approved. And we still have 51 that are pending review. We believe that we'll have all of the current applications reviewed by the Planning Commission probably in January of 2020, by January. Just a brief overview of the ownership, the residency that we saw from the applications that we received. Generally, we had some resident ownership of from Grand Rapids and including the general target area of applications, but the primary applicant was generally from Michigan outside of Kent County. There were several points in the MyVita that spoke to local economy, and you can see that many applicants took advantage of those commitments to hire local workforce, to use micro local business enterprises, and to hire at least 30 employees. Also, there have been some questions about initial investment amount, and so we have those outlined for you here too. As far as recreational marijuana goes, as Kristen mentioned, action is required by November 1st to avoid a de facto opt-in without having regulation on the books. In addition to what was allowed by the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act, which was MRTMA, which allowed for recreational marijuana uses in the state, the MRA, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency, also released a set of administrative rules in July, and those introduced some new land use types as well as a social equity program. So I want to briefly go over those land use types. MRTMA authorized, again, the act that was approved by voters, authorized the growing, processing, retail sale of marijuana products, also safety compliance facility for testing, secure transport, and a micro business, which is essentially a vertically integrated but smaller facility that will allow for growing, processing, and retail sale on site. The administrative rules introduced an excess grower class, which is when you have more than 13,000 plants as a grower. Introduced a designated consumption establishment, which is on-site consumption and sale of marijuana products, either smoked or consumed in other ways. And then also temporary marijuana events like a festival where you could have on-site sale and consumption of marijuana, and the marijuana event organizer who puts together those events. So those are new uses that have been introduced in addition to what was allowed or passed by voters in November. Two sort of special classes or cases as far as who can get licenses is for the first 2 years. So the MRTMA, went into effect on December 6th of 2019, and for the first 2 years, that act authorizes that only Michigan residents can receive licenses for Class A growers and micro businesses for those first 2 years. Additionally, Class B and C grower, so larger growers, processing labs, retailers, and secure transporters, those licenses, those recreational licenses for the first 2 years can only be given to current medical licensees. So that can restrict who can receive what licenses for those first 2 years. The agency can potentially change that after 1 year, so in December of 2020. But as of right now, those are license restrictions by the state. We had talked about potential barriers to entry for medical marijuana licenses. There were some significant capitalization requirements ranging from $150,000 to $500,000 in order to get pre-qualified. Those for recreational, those state capitalization requirements have been removed. There is a $6,000 state application fee, and then initial licensing and renewal fees are on a sliding scale for recreational marijuana uses from $4,000 to $40,000. This table is meant to just sort of show a comparison between what was allowed by the MMFLA for the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act for medical, what's allowed by MRTMA for recreational, and then the administrative rules on the third column, trying to sort of summarize the different uses that are allowed. I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen for next steps, unless I can answer any questions for you at this point.
Thank you, Landon. So we understand that this is complicated and there's a lot of information, and we are doing our very best to provide you with very detailed memos that help define the uses that Landon has just mentioned. And we will continue to provide you with everything we can to support you and help you make good policy for medical marijuana, or for marijuana and recreational marijuana. So as I mentioned, for next steps, we will be coming to you to ask you to introduce a licensing ordinance on September 24th to establish that framework that would effectively serve as an opt-in prior to that November 1st deadline. Over the springtime, winter, not spring. Over the winter into the spring, we will be looking at updating our zoning ordinance to address recreational marijuana. The clerk's department will have quite a bit of work to get ready for a licensing ordinance should you pass that. And over the coming weeks, perhaps importantly, prior to that September 24th, we'll be working with the commission to determine which recreational marijuana uses you wish to allow in the city. So Landon read a list, so we will determine which which uses are appropriate, and also which ones you wish to license. So those are some of the, I think, future decision points that we'll need to be helping you prepare for come September and October. So are there any questions for me or Landon?
Commissioner, I'll start with Commissioner Jones.
Okay. Thanks so much for the update. Question that I have is regarding, I know that it was announced that there were 19 cities who were the recipients of discounts to open Michigan marijuana businesses. Wondering if there are things that we can do locally to also provide some form of discount for the high poverty areas. And my initial request to all of this was that we look to reach out to the state to see if we can not so much ask for that same type of opportunity for the entire city, but I'd be okay with just census tracts, certain census tracts that have been deemed high poverty. And just wondering again, what is it that we can do? Do you have any suggestions in terms of what we can do to provide any discounts for high poverty areas and individuals who live there who want to get to the business?
So I think overall, there are definitely some social equity considerations that are being worked on by various departments within the city. I know Brandon Davis and I believe the attorney's office, is also working on that. We are definitely open to ideas such as what you've just mentioned. So yes, absolutely. I think that there are ways that we can work to continue to advance those concerns.
Okay, very good. Also wanted to confirm, so essentially the real opportunity for the recreational side of things, in particular for those who've been historically marginalized, is around the Class A growing, right? Which would put them in a position to grow 100 plants on the recreational side, correct? And that's about it, right? Everything else, according to...
Or the micro business.
Or the micro business, which is 150 plants plus processor and retail. But everything else falls into the hands of those who've already been approved or who are already license holders for medical marijuana, correct? Okay. All right.
Just for the first 2 years.
For the first 2 years,
For the
that's
first,
correct.
right, 2 years, right.
And if they were to receive a medical license in that time, they could then also apply for a recreational license.
Right. But again, the difference is this opportunity here, there's less of a financial burden for the recreational side, and that financial burden is still rather significant on the medical side. Correct. Okay. All right. Very good.
And to follow up to Commissioner Jones' question, I have two follow-up questions to that. So would we have the opportunity to say that we are willing to move forward with some and not all of the different types? And so to allow some in the city but hold off on others? That's one question. Second question is, have we taken a closer look at what legally we can do to incent local preference?
I think to answer your first question is yes. I don't know the answer to the second question, I'm sorry.
Okay. Commissioner Repart?
Kind of related to the question that Mayor Bliss just asked, with regards to the kind of a la carting, choosing what we can allow in the city, how does that relate to events and on-site consumption, since those are admin rule designated? Can we, do we still, what control do we still have around those two things, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think I would defer to our attorney's office to answer that question. I don't know if Ms. Rua would be prepared to answer or not today.
Okay.
And we can talk more about that, but I think our special events ordinance would still allow us to have certain controls in the absence of a license, but we certainly could consider licensing as well in addition to our special events ordinance.
Okay, okay.
But going back to my initial question, if we decided we're going to hold off and not allow the designated consumption and events at this time until we've worked through some of the initial process, we would have the ability to do that?
Yes,
Okay, so that would be a decision we could make.
yes.
Okay, Commissioner Moody? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Lanning?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
No, go ahead.
On slide number 2, there's a bullet that says, receive 13 more applications after initial application window. Help me to recall kind of what that process, how that, I remember there was a window, people could apply. So is it ongoing that people can apply now? And how will this all work? Sorry, I'm forgetting if we had covered this.
We expected a large number of applications initially. We did receive 89 for the first 2 weeks. And that application window was in order to get it entered into the draw. But we continue to receive applications, continue to allow or accept applications as they come in. We've received 13 more. Some came in the day after the application window closed for the draw. Some came in the last couple of weeks.
And so then how are they now being considered if the draw kind of set the tone for the order in which they would be considered typically?
On a first-come, first-served basis.
Okay,
So we have a queue that goes to the Planning Commission in that order as we're able to. And then as applications come in and are received, we review them, determine when they were complete, and then in order of completion, we just put them
Get
in
in
the queue.
line. Okay, so we won't do like a application period annually or anything like that. It'll be kind of this now ongoing thing since it's already established.
Well, that's for medical.
Sure.
If the commission would like, we could do something similar for recreational
Okay.
Down the road.
Okay. And then the other question is on the next slide. It kind of outlines some of the data that's been collected regarding the MyVita, and I think this is really helpful. Can you produce something very similar to those that have been approved? So this is all applicants, which I think is really helpful to know, but it would be great to see those that have been approved, what that makeup looks like now.
Absolutely.
And I think that's it. Thank
And
you.
then in follow-up to what Commissioner Lanier said, once an application is approved, and this came up last week when we were talking about the waivers, the application that would then not be allowed based on distance,
Yes.
are those then removed, or do those still go forward for review?
No, they would effectively be buffered out.
They would be buffered out. So are they then withdrawn or removed? Okay,
From the queue.
from the queue, okay.
It's a living queue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Moody?
Yeah, I was just interested in understanding the Class A, B, and C growers in reference to the applicants. How many applicants there were in A, and B, and C, if that's broken down?
As far as medical applicants that we've received so far, all of the grows have been Class C, so 1,500 plants, up to 1,500 plants. In some cases, you can stack Class C licenses, so we have, for example, one larger grower that has 10 Class C licenses for 15,000 plants.
Say that last part again, please, I didn't hear you.
You can stack Class C licenses, so we have one grower who applied with 10 Class C licenses for a total of 15,000 plants.
Can that be broken down for our understanding?
Mr. Bartley, can you raise the microphone more so we can hear you,
I'm
please?
sorry, yeah.
Commissioner, what I think he's saying, and my understanding is that you could have one grower, and they can get multiple Class C licenses. So Class C license, let's say they have 5 Class C license, and each license they're allowed to have 2,000 plants.
Yeah, I understand
They
that.
could get 10.
I understand. I just wanted to have a clear understanding as to if that one grower has a number of licenses, is it possible for us as commissioners could understand why that one grower has that many licenses and the purpose of them having that many licenses? At least have it on paper so we'll know that in Class C, there's X amount of license for one particular person.
Good, that's a great question. I'm sure we can get that information.
And the reason why I said it, because it's confusing as I read it, when you're talking about applicants, okay, one applicant was approved and he has 7 or 8, 9 licenses. Sometimes I take a little issue with that. Even though they've been approved, it's okay. I just want to know, not fighting against it. I just think that the community doesn't have an understanding or an awareness that that's how the process works.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Commissioner. And it would be nice to know, particularly for the growers that have been approved and for those different locations, how many plants they plan to have on that site for the grow operations.
So we've approved, the Planning Commission has approved 3 grow applications, all of which are Class C licenses. One of them on Hall near 131 received the approval for 10 licenses, so up to 15,000 plants. One on Oak Industrial was a Class C, up to 1,500 plants, so just one Class C license. And then the other at 701 Ann, just east of Alpine, was also a Class C, but approved for 1. They could come back for additional plants in the future. They have a significant amount of space, 140,000 square feet, in fact, that could potentially be used for growing, but they were only approved at this time for 1.
Okay.
So 1,500 plants. So we have a total approval at this point of 18,000 plants across 3 grows.
Thank you, that's helpful. Commissioner?
So that leads me to the next question. Is there any limit on how many licenses one grower can get? No?
No, we would, the state doesn't
They
limit
have space.
licenses. With the new scheme, there is now an excess grower. After a certain amount of plants, if you have 2 medical licenses, 1,500 plants, so 3,000 medical plants, and then 5 Class C recreational, so 10,000 recreational plants, and that's just what the end use of the plant product is diverted to. So you have a total of 13,000 plants. If you'd want additional plants on top of that, now you have an excess grower license. But there's no limit. It just is a scheme of how each plant is licensed, or how
Okay.
each group of plants is licensed.
What is the cost of each license?
At the state level, the cost of each license currently is around $70,000. At the city level, we are maxed out at $5,000 per license.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Jones.
Just one quick question. One quick question. I've had a number of constituents who have inquired about where we are around regarding the designated consumption aspect of the storefront. Can you speak to that? I see here it just says on-site consumption. Can you speak to that?
I think that's a future decision point for the commission and the planning commission as to
Okay.
whether or not we wish to allow and
Gotcha.
license that in the city.
Okay.
And then in the future, if we do choose to opt in to allow it, there would be a zoning discussion about where and under what regulations.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So going back to the question around licenses, that is our next steps. I know you raised the question about what types would be licensed. Commissioners, just so you know, initially, my thought is any type of use that we would allow should be licensed. So my preference would be that every single type of use should go through a licensing process, similar to a business license. And again, looking at the potential for a license that allows us to do a number of things, including some of the questions that have come up around this table about accountability for individuals and companies who commit to doing something in the community. That would allow us an opportunity to hold those individuals accountable. So as we think about license, I want you to just to think about that. That will give us an opportunity to say we're going to move forward with recreational in some form or fashion. That's still for us to decide. And then it will give us a good 6 months to work through those details. So timeline for license to come back. So that will be back before us on September 24th.
Yes.
Okay. And I know I've heard from several folks around this table, and I feel the same, that we're hopeful that the license will allow us to hold organizations or companies accountable for what they committed to in the MyVita.
That is our
And
goal
so
as
my
well.
guess is that in the license too, that there will be some language around if there's non-compliance and what our options are.
Yes.
Okay. And then the companies that have already went through the application process and been approved, they too would have to come into compliance with the license once we have that in place. Is that true?
That is our plan, yes, is that we would license all facilities, marijuana facilities. Landon has had those conversations with medical facilities that have been approved or applying. So I don't know that it would be a huge surprise that there would be a licensing component associated with an existing land use approval.
And the intent would be that the license would be annual, so we'd have an opportunity annually to review compliance?
Yes.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, any other questions about next steps? Commissioner?
I think it's, and you've referenced how difficult it is, there's so much detail in all this, but just to get a sense of how do we compare to other cities, Lansing, for example, or Detroit, and I know populations are different, but when we talk about this number of plants, it's hard to have a sense of what that means in terms of retail consumption, and for us then to make some kind of decisions around zoning, land use, and number of licenses, and where we can and cannot limit that.
Commissioner, over the next coming weeks, we can gather that as much benchmark information. We've talked about it in some respects among staff. We don't have that in the memo, but we can do some education and use that as a point of reference as we develop the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. For me, I think the cities we can look to would be Ann Arbor, Lansing, Battle Creek, and Kalamazoo. I think Detroit has had a number of unique issues, but also their geographical landmass is very different than ours.
Yeah.
They're not as concentrated, so they have some different dynamics. All right, Commissioners, anything else? All right, we'll look forward to having the licensing ordinance come back at our next meeting, and we can review that. And then for all of us who lived through the last process around medical marijuana, we hopefully learn from that, and we'll be able to work through this a little bit more smoothly, is my hope, since we have a little bit of experience under our belt. So thank you both for your work on this and the Attorney's Office. And please send us additional information to help us prepare for this ongoing discussion. I know the packet that you sent was really helpful. And so if you can continue to add additional information, I think that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let me also,
City Manager,
Mayor,
go ahead.
if I could express my thanks to Ms. Turkelson, Mr. Barley for their work. I think we have started on a great start. It has been a lot of work, but they really have laid it out in a way that the commission and the public could really consume this, and no pun intended, edible bites as we move forward. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioners, so last item before us, I'd like to talk to you and just get some input from you as I work with our city clerk to come up and finalize a process for filling the upcoming vacancy for city comptroller. So we sent out kind of a draft of a process with some blank dates in it, and I would like to get just a sense of a consensus from this body on your preference. The first one, in light of how we have filled vacancies in the past, sometimes we create a subcommittee. The last 2 times that we filled a vacancy, we actually kept the process in front of the full body. So if you recall, for Commissioner Jones and Commissioner Moody's appointment, we had everyone who applied for that position come before the full commission for a brief 20 to 30-minute interview. We went through all of the applications.
Not for Moody.
Oh, not for Moody. We had a subcommittee. That's right. Thank you. Of residents. That's right. So we did it different for Commissioner Jones. So we've had multiple processes. We've also had different processes for appointed officials. And so what I would like to do is get feedback from you on whether you would like to create a subcommittee to review initial applicants, or have all of the initial applicants come before the full body with abbreviated interviews. And then we as a full body would make a recommendation for the top 2 or 3 to move on for a second round. So preference?
Do we have to make the decision beforehand? I think, if we were to get 50 applicants, then having a subcommittee would work. But, if we get 3, then the full body seems like it would work. So do we have to make the decision before we open it up for applicants?
That's a great point. I don't think we do. The only thing I was thinking is with looking at our schedules for the rest of the year, trying to get some times blocked off on our calendars. Now, what we could do is we could block off some time, just anticipating, I would guess 18 to 20 applications. I'm pretty sure we had 16. I'll have to go back and look. So we could put some blocks in, and then whether that's the full commission or a subcommittee of the commission, we could decide once we know how many applications. But I was thinking more timing-wise to just get some blocks on our schedule for this. I know that with the end of the year coming up, we have a mid-year budget retreat and update, and then all of the end of the year work that we have to do. So I'm happy to do either way, depending on the number of applications.
Well, and if we think, the average number of applicants would be, over 15, then maybe we can make the decision about a subcommittee or not today.
Yeah.
If that's what it's been. I couldn't remember for the comptroller years ago when you all went through an appointments process. I know the commission
Commissioner.
seats are a little unique,
Yeah.
so.
Commissioner Kelly, do you remember
Well,
how
I
many?
do know that, I think one.
I think we had like 8 or 9 last time.
Yeah, I think we had two very different situations.
Yeah, yeah,
One with a small number and one with a larger number, so who knows?
Okay.
But it would be important, just like with any appointment, that the vetting is done ahead of time. You may recall, we had some issues before where people.
Were not eligible.
If
Yeah.
people owe the city money, just like with any board, the state law requires that those
Yeah.
debts are taken care of beforehand. So that sort of vetting will happen in the clerk's office. But I think that that's fine to wait until, maybe we need to think about a cutoff, anything over 8 people, for example. Maybe we need a subcommittee to at least go through and pull out the ones that they recommend to go forward.
So I'm good with holding off and deciding today when what I'd like to do is bring something back at our next meeting, finalize some of the language and have it posted, deciding how long we keep the application period open, give the clerk's office time to vet the candidates to ensure that they're eligible. And then at that point, once we have a number, deciding if we want to move forward with a subcommittee or the full body.
I have a question, Madam Mayor. The candidates who will apply for this position, do they have to be residents of Kent County or Grand Rapids? They
Yes.
have to be?
They have to be a resident of the city.
The city.
Yeah. That's one of the requirements.
For 6 months.
For 6 months,
Yeah,
for a minimum of 6 months,
And registered voter.
and a registered voter, yeah.
So the only input, I think that's good, we can come back with some suggestions. The only input that I'd like to provide is that whatever parameters we put in place, that they do not exceed the parameters that would be in place if someone were to get petition signed to become an elected official. So I think we need to be careful with that to put, and I know the last process, in my opinion, had eligibility requirements that you wouldn't necessarily need to jump through those hoops if you were to get elected, so.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we'll be very clear with the posting, and we'll work on the language for that to make sure that it is clear that the eligibility is what is very clear in the charter for eligibility to run for the office. And then obviously we'll be able to, based on the candidates, we'd be able to take a look at their experience and make a decision whether we believe that their experience is a good fit for the position. But that really is subjective for us to decide around this table, but we'll be clear on what is actually required by charter to be appointed, and then to also, if the individual decides to run for the office, what that is. Yeah. So commissioners, for timeline, thinking of timeline, we do have a city election coming up, so the clerk's office is quite busy. I would like to recommend that once the position is posted, that we give people ample time to apply. So looking at maybe a 3 to 4 week window. And then roughly, maybe accept applications in October, and then in November, decide on a process for going through first round interview, and then second round interview, and then hopefully having a decision made, by the end of November or early December. So that was the rough timeline in my mind. Are you all comfortable with that? And we can take a look at commission schedule and at least block off some potential times. Okay. And then we can also decide at a later date, but this is something I want you to think about, is whether once we have the final candidates identified, if we want to do some type of community forum or community reception where folks can come and meet the candidates and provide some input before a final decision is made. We've done very formal community meeting, so I recall Commissioner Jones participated in a community meeting where it was a lot of Q&A. We've had more informal receptions here in the chambers. You remember that well, Commissioner?
And I surely do.
And then we've had other processes where it's more informal reception here. And then I know that we have a conversation with our deputy city comptroller, because we know that there will be a vacancy, and so we'll have that conversation as well to just make sure that that department is feeling comfortable, not just with the process, but that they have the support they need during the interim period. So that's a conversation that I'm happy to follow up with this week. So am I missing anything else, commissioners?
I don't think so.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, well, I will, after today, I'll meet with our clerk. He and I will then go over a potential plan. I'll bring that back on the 24th, and then we can formally adopt that and move forward. All right. With that, I will close this meeting, and again, we have Economic Development Project Team at 12:30. And those of you who serve on that with me, I will plan to see you in 6:01. All right. We're adjourned. All right.